Welcome to Faith, Purpose, and Freedom. I am Kayla Rose, your host, and I have Sara Roccisano with me today. And she is going to share her world tours, her new book, and her amazing spiritual gifts with us today. Welcome.
Hi, Kayla. Thanks for having me. Hello, everybody.
Absolutely. So excited that you're here. So let's start with hearing more about the book. We were talking beforehand. I want everybody to know.
Oh my goodness, where to begin? So the book is called Stone Temple Passport: Awake and Radiate with Mama Ayahuasca, and it's a 100% true story based on my travel adventure, leaving New York City, where I used to live, and going on to Morocco, to the Amazon rainforest, and then onward to Bolivia in the Altiplano and kind of remote parts of the Andes Mountains, and then returning home to New York City 5 weeks later with coronavirus shutting everything down in early 2020.
Oh,
And it's a
goodness.
100% true story of my transformation, and it's part of a transformational series of what happens onward after I come back from the rainforest.
Yeah, I love it. So let's just kind of talk about, we don't want to give away too many details, but what is some of your key points in the book that you just absolutely can't wait to get out there?
That it's all interconnected, that there's no such thing as coincidences, that the highest
That's good.
vibrational frequency there is love, therefore creator God, protect the
Huh,
plants, and about the power of reciprocity.
yeah. So you know what? It's great that you said that because I was actually just having this conversation with my kids the other day. Just we have a young man that we love dearly who had fallen into addiction and struggled really badly. And so I was like, I had a dream about him and I woke up and there's a message on my phone. And my daughter's like, "Mom, I was thinking about messaging him." And I was like, "Okay, clearly we should." And so last night I go to Walmart and guess who's in the parking spot right beside me? No joke. And so it was so ironic because we just had this whole conversation over I don't think coincidences are real anymore. I really think we need to learn to listen. Like nature tells us, the world tells us, the atmosphere is telling us, follow it. It is our creator's plan. Like we need to listen, not just be like, it's just a coincidence and walk the other way.
Correct. And dismiss it as, crazy. The reality is we are tuned to a divine field that is God. And he
Yeah.
creates. He wants you to be in abundance so you can create on behalf of him. He's experiencing himself in all of us through these 3D
Yeah.
vessels. And we're all having unique experiences of co-creation. And so,
Right.
yeah, so it's important to expand your gifts, expand your consciousness beyond your five senses, five human senses. And so you
Right.
have clairaudience, right? Telepathic, ESP. So in your case, you were attuned to the field. You heard as an antenna what's going on, in the interconnectivity in the
Yeah.
realms. And so that was the call, right? To connect with your heart. And you did. You listened to the call.
And well, I spent my whole life running from the call. I spent my whole life running because I would get these ideas and I'd think, "Oh, that's a good idea," for a moment, and then I'd think, "No, it's just a coincidence that that happened," or "No, that can't be for me," and I think that happens for so many of us. We think, "No, it couldn't be me," and we don't realize that we are co-created. He is working through us. He is waiting for us to realize we are co-created, partner with him, and run with him.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, how often do we run from the answer that's right in front of our face?
When we're running, we're disempowered. And that's being taught to us by this kind of physical realm that we're in, right? The
Yeah.
narrative that you're not enough, that you got to follow the leader. The leader knows better than you, authority knows better than you, right? But ultimately, when you sit in the rainforest and you're in kind of solitude and silence, you start to understand that I'm connected and I'm more empowered than I ever can imagine and I'm sovereign. I
Yeah.
answer to my higher power, and that's important, and I know how to really kind of listen to what my calling should be, and I'm gonna follow through with courage, and that's the true sense of
Yes.
empowerment.
Well, that is so good. I feel like I'm in a whole coaching session right now. Um, seriously, because when you think about it, we get so stuck in life. I became a mom at 18 years old, so I spent my whole life in survival mode. There was never time for me to just go sit in silence. And so I think oftentimes children even I do youth ministry and I see so many kids who they've just struggled their whole life. Silence was never something they could get comfortable with because if it was silent, something scary was about to happen.
Mm,
And especially these kids that grow up and their parents struggle with addiction or, single parents and everything's in survival mode. If it gets silent, it's scary.
absolutely.
So we learn to run from silence. We learn to just constantly stay busy, constantly stay in survival, constantly be doing something. And so we get disconnected from our creator because of that.
That's right, and we're not victims either. Well, it's being done to us as well, right? With the advent
Right?
of phones now, social media, there's constant scrolling, constant need for that dopamine hit, right? There's constant, entertainment now. There's so many channels at your fingertips on the internet, YouTube, Netflix, whatever, right? Too many channels on Spotify to listen to music, too many podcasters to catch up on. There's constant noise. Constant
Yeah.
need for your attention and your consciousness. So it's a battle of ultimately for your consciousness that the external world, this material world, is vying
Right.
for. But the reality is, if you go to nature, take your shoes off, ground in grass, take a deep breath, look at the sky, have reverence for, the sun and the blue sky and the trees and nature, the sound of the birds, and you realize you can regulate your nervous system and you could be calm. And then that's when the real magic happens, when manifestation, because now you're connecting with the higher power. Anything is
Yeah.
achievable.
And I just want to tune in on that. My kids were in a really bad situation at school and things were just hard for them. So I brought them home to homeschool. And my daughter had, I used to say, fallen victim, but she did not fall victim to anything. She is a survivor of an attempted abduction. And she's 11 today. Our family struggled with it. Like it hurt and it was hard. And so one of the biggest things that we could do was ground. And
Right.
I have a good friend who she is a counselor and amazing at her job. And she's like, after all week, every week of me sitting, listening to everybody's problems and helping guide people, she every Friday, she was off work and that's what she would do. She sits and she grounds, or she still does. That was her way of reconnecting with nature and just grounding. So we started doing that and we'd be out in our front yard, people driving by looking at us like we're crazy people. That's fine. But we're out there grounding and all of our shoes off, just really taking it in. And that's where we would read scripture and pray together. And the healing that came from that silence and just sitting in there and truly just leaning in and conversating and letting them ask the questions because kids have questions. Don't silence them. And I believe that that grounding is what healed us the most because, as you said, we got closer to God that way.
Isn't that beautiful? And you
It,
listened.
we did. And I
You
didn't
knew
always
you
at
knew to
first.
do that. You knew to do that.
I knew that's what I needed at the time, though. I really did. And I think it's beautiful that God has a way of pulling us from the chaos. And it hurts. It hurts in the moment. Like it feels like a breakup. I don't care if you're actually going through a breakup or if it's a friend or I feel like sometimes he will pull us away from the chaos to let us sit in the silence with him and really listen. And those are the moments we have to learn that not to run from the silence. Accept it.
Mm.
Really tune in.
And relish in it.
Oh, yeah, because in the end, you have a beautiful relationship with your creator. You have a beautiful relationship with nature. And that's where I, at one point in my life, was on 27 pills. Like doctors just
Oh.
giving me pill after pill after pill. You have fibromyalgia, you have this, you have that. I was so unhealthy. It was awful. And so my husband started just talking to me about nature and nature heals, and I'm like, "Hmm." It's true. I
It is true.
today take, I take 2 pills. I take Synthroid because I had my thyroid out because I had thyroid cancer, and I take an estrogen pill because I had to have a full hysterectomy last year. That's all I take. Other than that, I take supplements or nature. Like, I mean, we were sick. We had COVID, and I was so sick, and my husband went up and he got staghorn sumac. He come home and he made me a tea out of it. I'm telling you, within 24 hours, I felt like I wasn't even sick.
I believe it. I mean,
It
during coronavirus, that was, one of the things I saw when I came back to New York City. The power of vitamin D, the power of the sun, the power of, antioxidants like blueberries and fresh fruits and greens.
Yeah,
It really does make a difference because vitamin D actually it does come from the sun. It comes from mushrooms. It comes in. I think you can find it in other, healthy, natural foods. And what it does is it reduces inflammation.
yeah,
And what coronavirus was turning out to be was an inflammation disease, right, of your artery capillaries, right?
right.
Right, they almost were saying it was similar to, altitude sickness, which we know a lot about from traveling, and you climb mountains, and you have lack of oxygen, which is why they were trying to put people on ventilators. It was a
Oh,
respiratory issue, but it was also an inflammation issue. So if you could reduce the inflammation and go in the sun and not shelter in place that they were trying to force us to do in New York, stay in the sun, be in fresh air, be close to the water if you could, be in
right.
nature. It is a natural elixir. It does help in those ways. Nature can cure.
Yeah, it truly can. I mean, and that's the thing is I help out in a funeral home, and I can remember sitting with one of the funeral directors, and he was just explaining to me during that period the deaths that came in and, what they were seeing, and I was just traumatized. I was like, "I can't even imagine," and it's true, sometimes think people got locked in their homes, they weren't leaving, and is that what made it so bad?
I think
Uh
it did. It was a mental health crisis in a lot of ways, especially in New York City. And my book goes into that as I come back from the rainforest and 5 weeks away. I left New York the end of January 2020, completely removed from society, had no idea what was going on. And I come back 5 weeks later, right before St. Patrick's Day. New York City knows that the final day where they shut the city down was when they canceled the St. Patrick's Day parade that, marches down Fifth Avenue by the St. Patrick's Cathedral. And so I was like 2 weeks shy of them shutting down for good. And I was like, what is going on?
what
How
is
did the
happening?
city change in 5 weeks? Right. So
Yeah,
I was kind of this like oddball saying, I don't understand. Why is everyone freaking out? What's going on? And, like, it was interesting to watch it because what do they say? 2 weeks. I was just asking you to stay for 2 more weeks in your apartment. And where you live in New York, right, I lived in 800 square feet. I had no real access to sunlight. I lived in a like a tall skyscraper, right? I was never, in fresh air. I forced
oh,
myself to go out, but, I was the only one in a ghost town, which is really kinda weird to see too in New York.
right.
And so I was very much, a rebel, if you will, because I felt like the news was saying one thing, but the reality around me was a very different thing. Like my neighbor had it and she was fine, and my instructor had it and he was fine. So it's like, what's going on? What's happening? And though some also were sick and were much more sick than the other two examples I just mentioned, but it just really was something where the narrative now looking back, you're like, oh, wait a minute, we probably should have listened to our internal guidance instead of,
Yeah.
being told what to do and how to think and then being scared into compliance in a lot of ways. Because that to me
Oh,
was a
yeah.
lot of where I was getting angry was the forcing and the mandates and,
Yeah,
being told like it's us versus them and you're a jerk, you're a piece of shit. Like all these narratives that people were taking on because people were scared. And who scared
absolutely.
them is the real question, right? So I think there's a lot really to unpack still about about what had happened. But I still think, though, the natural ways of going about, maintaining a healthy diet, being out in the sun, mental
Yeah.
health, being around people, not being told you can't, be with your loved ones, or you can't have a wedding, or you can't, leave your apartment for that matter, right?
Right.
These
Yeah.
things scare people more than just the virus itself.
So my question to you, and I'm sorry, it's just in my mind, so I'm just gonna ask your thoughts because I refuse to research it. I refuse to look it up. But my 16-year-old daughter came up to me freaking out. She's like, Mom, we're all gonna die. It's like COVID all over again. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I had to threaten that she was gonna lose her access to the internet because I forget, but this virus that was found on the ship or
Oh, hantavirus.
Hanta, that's
And
what it's called.
yeah, and it's slang for fake. Have you seen that?
I haven't. I haven't because I refuse to even look because I'm like, people are, but I did see one post on social media, but I try not to scroll because it's just like a whole new mental health thing. I won't scroll. It's just me. Um, I did see something the one night whenever I opened it up and I started scrolling and reading some of the comments and I was just like, ugh. And so I had to shut it off. So I was like, not doing it, Caleb, not doing it.
Yeah.
But I do. I mean, my husband, he is probably one of the world's largest conspiracy theorists in ways. He's getting better. But he was just like, he's like, this is just crazy. And he understands some of it, but he's like, I feel like people are just freaking out more because of the COVID situation. I don't know that it's really a big issue.
And is it an issue? I don't know, because what I'm learning is what's right in front of me, what's right around me, what's real.
Yeah.
Like my book, actually, the first page of the book goes to ask the questions, what's real, what's going on, where am I? It's a derealization crisis. It's what
Yeah.
is real? What is my illusion in front of me? Because we all have different experiences. We're all co-creating a different illusion. And
Yep.
so because everything is energy and frequency at the end of the day, we're just an energy body. So we can,
Right.
quantum physics tells us we ultimately, when we put conscious focus onto something, it becomes an object, it materializes. When we take our
Yeah.
conscious focus away, this is the double slit experiment that quantum physics has taught us, has shown us in experimentation. When you observe something, you observe a light particle or a light laser, or light, I guess, a stream of light, if you will. It's
Right.
either a wave or a particle. So when you observe the light, or a camera observes, or some sort of an acting body is observing the ray of light, it becomes stationary in terms of a particle. But when you
Right.
turn your consciousness away from it, it now becomes invisible as a wave of light again. So ultimately, that means what we put our conscious attention to is what manifests.
There you
And
go.
so
That's
if it's not around you, is it even real? It's
right.
a real question. I haven't
Yeah.
seen anyone with this virus, period. I don't know. You're telling me
And
on, Twitter, but okay.
right.
Right? And so and like I said, when I came to New York City, what the world in front of me was very different than the narrative that CNN was telling me. And
That
I was
yeah.
physically in Midtown Manhattan going, it's very different. So that's where it begs the question, like, you are creating your reality. So if the world externally is feeding you a narrative to keep you disempowered and in a state of fear, a low vibrational state, right? You're going to buy into it and agree to it, and then
Right.
it manifests. So I know something here. I like to think about things in formulas. Manifestation equals intention plus faith, meaning you're intending on something because you want to manifest it, but you
Right.
also need to rely on faith for it to be delivered, right?
Yep.
So manifest equals intention plus faith.
I
But if
love
you were to
that.
if you were to replace the word faith and say, well, what does faith really equal? Faith equals source, God, right? Source God, plus the
Right.
ether, which is this medium that we're in, plus
Yeah.
you. So you're co creating to have faith with source using the medium that's the ether, plus you. You and source co-create with the ether, and that brings you faith. So the equation now, it can be replaced. Manifest equals intention plus faith. Manifest equals intention plus source plus ether plus you. So,
Ah,
if you want to manifest a different reality, which is exactly what we're finding out now in this awakening paradigm shift that we're going through, this
right.
collective awakening that is now opening our senses and our higher consciousness power, we're realizing that we co-create the experience around us. So, if I want to manifest that this virus is bullshit, manifest my
I'm gonna
intention is I
manifest
don't
it's
believe it,
bullshit. That's
and I'm
right.
going to co-create it with faith, through faith with source and God. So, it's not around me. I
Right.
don't know if it's real. I don't know now, and so back to conspiracies, like, what's real? Did the moon landing
Right.
happen? I don't know. Is that real? I didn't see it. I don't know it. I didn't live it. I wasn't in a spaceship. Is it real? I don't know. Maybe,
We
maybe
don't know.
not, but who knows? Right? I think that's where now the empowerment starts to come in because,
Right.
you're homeschooling your kids. You're teaching them, things that maybe the school system isn't teaching in some ways, right? Because the school system
Yeah.
might be off with the history, the way they're recounting it. We realize history is changeable, right? We don't know what really
Well,
happened.
and
We
they
we
only
may have
teach
some
what they
text and
want you to
stuff.
know.
Yeah, so it's a control, right? Just like they're vying for your consciousness, they're vying for a narrative, they're vying for
Yeah.
you to be disempowered because a disempowered populace is easier to control.
Yep. Yep. Very good.
And that's
So true.
exactly what the psychedelics told me in the Amazon rainforest, part of my book.
So
So when I came
I
back with that a
definitely
revelation and I see the world around me going, "What is this?" No wonder why you start
I
to stand
want
in your
to
power.
kind of dig into that for a moment, just because it is Mental Health Awareness Month and mental health is so important to me. And I want to know what your thoughts are on psychedelics. What exactly would you tell someone? There's psychedelic mushrooms, and they
Mhm.
have really good studies on what psychedelic mushrooms are doing to heal people from their, mental
Yes,
health. So let's talk
absolutely.
about that.
Well, just to caveat it, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist,
Right. Not a
uh,
doctor.
but I can speak from personal experience. So again, it goes
Yeah.
back to this feels real for me because I experienced it for myself. It's my truth. And so, caveat, right? If you want to work with ayahuasca, for example, no one with bipolar, no one on SSRIs. It's a very, very powerful plant medicine. And if you are taking these brain medications and you have some mental health issues, it's actually very dangerous. So please steer clear. Talk to your doctor. Be careful
Yeah.
before you decide. However, mushrooms, in the case of, vitamin D, we talked about that, but generally,
Right.
the psychedelic mushrooms, what they do is they help rebuild your neural networks in your brain. And
Right.
what these plant medicines do, these are not, pharmaceutical chemicals. This is natural. Ayahuasca is natural, mushrooms are natural, cannabis is natural, so on and so forth. These are more natural, I guess, medicines. The wisdom keepers and the shamans call them medicines.
Right.
Um, so what the mushroom does is it rewires your neural network system. And there was something very interesting that I saw. I put it together. I was listening to two different Joe Rogan podcast episodes, and he had this hunter on, and I forget his name. The name escapes me. It was one of his friends who's a hunter, and he goes out to these wilderness retreats or wilderness expeditions, like way deep into, let's say, Alaska or wherever he goes, and they're out for weeks on end, and they pack their meat when they get an elk or a moose or something, and they take horseback and they bring it back. So he was saying about how back in the day, we were hunter gatherers. And when you go out and you are looking for food for your tribe, it's kind of this. You're in a state of lack, right? And it's do or die. You need to find something, and so our brains are wired to seek out an animal. And when you finally get one, you're in this elation. You're absolutely ecstatic that I
Oh,
finally
yeah.
got, and I'm in reverence for it because the Native American way is to be very appreciative of the animal all of it. Thank you for this. I'm so grateful. I'm in gratitude. So your excitement is through the roof. You went from dearth and despair to, I'm so excited. So you have a
Yes.
natural boost of serotonin. And so that was always the way for humans all this time as we evolved. But then we
Right.
lost the way of hunting. We lost the way of the wilderness. We've lost the way of connecting with nature and having that, beautiful cathedral that is, a
Yes.
reverence of creator. And then the second podcast host person he had the following day was a neuroscientist. And she was talking about the neural pathways of addiction. And so what addiction does is if you could think about, and again, I'm not a doctor, but I'm just repeating what I heard on these podcasts.
Yeah.
So what if you could think about like a river and it kind of erodes a chasm over time and the rock erodes away and you have this massive gorge now as a result of the river. Um, Eventually the river, other water is having a harder time to find a pathway. It's going to go into the
Right.
gorge and continue in that eroded kind of pathway. And so
Yeah.
what she was explaining is that addiction does that in your neural networks. They are strengthened and others are deadened or atrophied. So you have this loop of constant need for the next kind of whatever it's doing for you, dopamine or whatever the external chemical that you are now addicted to. Plus, it's a spiritual
Right.
thing as well. But so you have this neural network that's now heavily in a chasm sort of state. And so we lost that like excitement, that dopamine hit, and the dopamine hit's getting replaced with now, you know, heroin or
Right.
whatever that's
Yeah.
now the brain is dependent on. So what the mushrooms do is they break that neural network loop and they redirect the firing neurons elsewhere and create new neural networks. And what it does, and I don't remember the term off the top of my head, but um, there's and I'm not a brain scientist, so I can't remember the term, but I'll have to get back to you about what it is. But it depresses our everyday awareness of the physical world and it expands out our antenna connections to the higher consciousnesses. So it's
Okay.
expanding your neural networks, but it's also uh, antennaing up to a higher realm. And so you can
Yeah.
see things more empowered, more of a wider consciousness lens, and you're healing and you're spiritually healing in a lot of ways too. So you need set and setting for the use of these plant medicines. I mean, a mushroom's not a plant, it's fungi, but still, it's medicine, natural medicine. And
Right.
you also need a protected container. So this is why the shaman, the wisdom keeper, is important to those that keep the tradition of the lineage of the reverence of ceremony, because you do want to have a protective energetic container to only allow the positive energy and to keep it protected from any sort of entities that are coming in and
Right.
negative kind of energies. So the real magic works when you connect with nature, set and setting, and
Yeah.
you're being facilitated with the facilitator is that shaman, that wisdom keeper. So once that's established and you have reverence for the medicine and you set your intention, the medicine shows you what you need to see. And if it means you got to heal from addiction, from trauma, you want to speak to God, you want to have an understanding of your higher power or your calling, whatever those beautiful
Yeah.
questions are, the medicine may be able to deliver
Well,
it. And I was able to document all of that in my book. I worked
that's
with the
awesome.
ayahuasca medicine for 7 ceremonies in the Amazon rainforest. And I never had worked with a psychedelic prior to that. So this was brand new for me in a very powerful psychedelic uh, solution. And so
That
I
is
saw a
awesome.
lot. And it's a very powerful book, and I highly recommend it. And then I go into the evolution and exploration of spirituality as a result.
So I mean, neuroplasticity is real. Like our brain has the power to rewire itself, and the human body has the power to heal itself. And nature has the power to heal our bodies. Also, I mean, it's beautiful when we really go back to the beginning. I the other day was like, this thought came in and it said, start reading the Bible from Genesis again. And so I have read 25 chapters in 2 days. And it's amazing how much you start taking in once you come to a point of knowing what you know and growing closer to God and kind of just taking it in now. And I'm just like, wow, we have ruined our own bodies.
Well,
Truly.
the the
But it's all fixable.
institutions, it's fixable, but again, like, we didn't do it on purpose in some ways,
No.
right? It's just the evolution of how our society's been kind of
Yeah.
heading, and it's the external world that's giving us the solution, right? They give us the problem, and then they give us a solution at the same time, but
Right.
it's and so now this is why we rise above and we know our sense of empowerment and sovereignty, like, "I know what's best for me, thank you very much."
Yeah. So first time I've ever spoke about this, but I was in a really, really bad state, almost ended my life in 2022. And mental health is just extremely important to me because of that. I'll never forget where I was, but I'll also never allow myself to feel it again. Like never happening to me again. But I had been through things in my life and spent most of my life in, just survival mode. Anyhow, psychedelic mushrooms was something I came across and I was done. Like I didn't want to take Prozac anymore. I didn't want to take mental health medications. And so I did I microdosed though. Um and I have never taken a depression medicine since. And my mind
Just got
goes to
goosebumps.
positive thinking. I I I mean, I can be in a really bad situation and for a moment get to me and I'm like, no, I control this. I have power over this. I have authority over this. I'm a co-creator. If Jesus could do it, I can do it. So I have learned to really just transition my mind. And so I think it's, yeah, I mean, again, I'm not a doctor either. However, it did work for me. I can only speak, from experience.
Beautiful.
And it
Yeah.
is, because I journaled some of my emotions and just different thoughts I had during that time period. And it was really amazing to go back and look. And I need to actually do that now that I think about it. Just pull that journal back out again and just kind of read it again.
Yeah.
And even, my growth since then, it's beautiful because you grow and you overcome those situations and suddenly the world around you, like you said, doesn't get to you because if it's not right here in front of me, it doesn't exist.
Mhm.
I don't
That's
I
right.
don't have to manifest it. Like,
Yeah, and it's a regulated nervous system, and it comes from within. So, if
right.
you are in a low vibe state, you're gonna manifest a low vibe state around you. So
Yeah.
you're creating an illusion that keeps you disempowered, right? But
Well,
if you're in a state of gratitude and you find a way to heal, and you can find the simplest things, the smallest little thing you could be grateful for today. It's a slow win, and then eventually you'll start to see the world around you shifting for the better, and you're like, "Oh my god, this is actually a really nice situation that I'm in now. Thank God. I'm really appreciative of this."
well, and that was the first place I started with my kids is we still do it, what's 3 things you're grateful for today? Because I feel like gratitude is so much, and it's amazing how you can be in the worst mood, like something can happen and you're like, "Oh," but you can't really be in a bad mood because then you're kind of it's just always in your head. Once you start doing it, you just are always thankful for something, so it makes it hard to be unthankful or ungrateful, and it just works on that positive mindset, mind over matter, and we have to stick there.
You have to,
So,
and you
I
have that.
definitely No, go ahead.
Yeah, gratitude is key, and you have to ask yourself, "What is this teaching me?" Right? The universe is working in my favor. That's pronoia, not the universe is out to get me, paranoia. Right? It's a
Yeah,
mindset shift. I have to find the lesson in this. I know this is a shitty situation right now. I acknowledge
right,
it for what it is. I acknowledge my low vibe feelings. I'm upset. I'm sad. I'm angry. I'm fearful. Right? But what is it teaching me? What am I meant to see from this? How is this working in my highest advantage and my best favor? Right? And that's
right.
ultimately where we go with that. It's appreciation and it's a knowing that this is going to work for my benefit. I just have to continue to hold on and see what that message really is ultimately.
Yeah, well, and that's God did not create us to be depressed and fearful and scared and, just he didn't create us for that. That is not what he intended for us at all. We are supposed to be happy and joyful and loving and kind. We are supposed to be together. So, I
That's
mean,
right.
yes,
That's right.
we need that time to obviously, I mean, Jesus went away and prayed and had his alone time with God. Yes, but he was always with people, helping people. And
Community, collective.
that's
Yeah,
yes,
fear
we
is
need
the
to live
opposite.
in love and unity.
Absolutely. Fear is the opposite of love. Love is the
Yeah.
opposite of fear, right?
Yeah.
Fear is a absence of the light. It's a lack of
Very
trust
good.
because God is the
Right.
highest vibrational energy there is, therefore love. And so if you're not in love, you're in a state of fear. So you're not
Yeah.
believing that God has me no matter what. So think about everything in a state of love and try your best to work through your fear. That fear is
Yeah.
the opposite of love. When I'm in a state of fear, I got to ask myself, how do I change this? How do
Right.
I get to calm? How do I ground? How do I, regulate my nervous system? How do I know that I'm in a state of love and I'm guided and protected?
Oh yeah. And I often look back and I think to myself, there were times when before I really was a believer and I got spiritual, and I don't think I ever wasn't a believer. I never didn't have faith because I can remember being in situations and still talking to God. I can remember being in situations and thinking to myself, everything's going to be fine. But yet the world around you lets you almost get into fear, and you have to learn to control that world around you. You can't
That's right.
control what people do, but you could definitely control those feelings and emotions and not let them
You
into
can
you.
control your reaction. Absolutely. And God
Yeah.
wants you in abundance because God wants you to work on behalf of him. So he needs you in a
Yeah,
state of abundance. So you trust that you're going to be
absolutely.
okay. And by the way, I just remembered it's a default neural network. I was
Default.
trying to
Oh, that's
remember. So the default neural network. So the mushrooms suppress your default neural network and it expands out
that
your
makes
consciousness as a result. Normally, right now we have a default neural network operating. So we're kind of in this state of like, you know, um,
yeah,
standardness, if you will. But
right.
once that default neural network is deactivated for the time being, you see beyond the material
Oh,
veil,
yeah.
and my book goes into those details very,
I think
very,
that
very
is
colorfully.
just I mean, and that is amazing. I think that your book is going to hit the hands of a lot of people that need it. And
You're
it's
right.
going to change lives because I know it is, because people just need to have that positivity. And people need
Mhm.
to hear this because oftentimes I think we might think it in the back of our mind, but we're like, no, that can't be it. So it's almost like a confirmation. And we can completely control our every thought, our every emotion. We can overcome anything. And
Absolutely. It
when your brain is able to make new pathways, it is able to heal itself.
Mhm.
Those old pathways can die off, and
That's right.
neuroplasticity was like the greatest thing I ever learned about my life because that was the moment I was just like, wow. And you start doing the little things, just starting with three things every morning, just write down three things you're grateful for.
Mhm.
And then eventually it kind of moves forward. So
That's
I
right.
kind of
And
want
then
to
you
touch
go
base with you.
outside and the sunshine, right?
Absolutely. I want to talk to you a little bit just because we were talking about it before the show, and I told you I was going to bring it up because I think we just definitely need to talk about it. And I'm excited. So, me and my husband have been on this whole case about, well, my husband more so than me, but he comes to me every day. We got astronauts going missing because, they found aliens and they started releasing or were going to release. And what are your thoughts on aliens? I mean, I told you my husband said to me, and he just said, we all believe in God, or for those of us that do believe in God, how could you ever possibly think that the only thing He created was Earth right here where we are, heaven and earth? That's it, and nothing else. And I was just like, wow, that is so true. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think a lot of people think that way, number 1. And I think that well, first of all, I'm gonna say that be careful of the external narrative with anything,
Yeah,
right? We were just talking about that before. The external religion even is an external narrative, right?
absolutely.
So ultimately, what we're in is a paradigm shift, and it's a consciousness awakening and an expansion and an ascension and a connection to Christ consciousness as our gifts open, right? Telepathically and otherwise, beyond the five senses. So
Yeah.
if we are relying on the government to tell us what the truth is, that's already the problem.
Amen.
Right? So if
Amen.
it they were hiding the truth and now they're gonna tell us the truth, okay, whatever. Ultimately, it's what do you think is true for you,
Yeah.
okay? And you invite in the higher dimensional beings because that's what they are. They're in the multi dimensions. We don't see them because we're in the 3D world. And as I just said, our gifts are opening. And as we expand in consciousness, we're going to start to see more things.
Yeah.
The plant medicines show you things in ceremonial settings because the default neural network is now depressed or suppressed. So you can see
Right.
more. Your consciousness expands to the higher dimensions in the multidimensional realms. So we're
Yeah.
doing it now. We're just expanding naturally. The collective is waking up. So we're going to see things. You're going to see something different than I see. I've already seen them. I've seen them in my past life regression hypnosis sessions. I saw an Arcturian, and I saw this beautiful Arcturian in 2013, and I didn't know what it was, but my facilitator was saying, "You have an alien guide. It's one of your guides." And I've seen the ships. I've seen them in Peru on our way to Machu Picchu this past July. They're cloaked in clouds. I've seen them over my house here in Connecticut. They were like lines of the edges of the craft was being lined by like a really bright white light. I've seen them in my dreams, even as early as 8 years old. And I've been told, just through my spiritual I guess, collective that I listen to and trust, that you can call them in because it's all about
Yeah.
consciousness. So it's we live in a realm. We're in a three-dimensional realm, but there's multi-dimensions, and my book goes into
Right.
this, and Carl Sagan talks about this as well. Carl Sagan, I went to Cornell, and he was a professor at Cornell a while ago, so he's near and dear to my heart because I used to see where he used to live, and he used to teach physics on campus. So when Carl Sagan talks, I'm like, all right, let's keep listening. So I'm a fan. But Carl Sagan in the 70s did a video, and we could Google this and you could go on YouTube and see it for yourself. It's called Flatland. And he talks
Okay.
about Flatland. It was a book, I think, written in maybe the 1800s or so, but he paraphrases it in about 7 minutes. And he talks about the dimensions. He talks about, and my book talks about this too, and this is what I saw literally with the help of psychedelics. I could understand fourth, fifth, sixth dimensions in my third eye sort of work.
That is
So
awesome.
it's amazing, and this is what I mean.
That's
These are what
awesome.
the plant medicines want you to see and unlock, more
Right.
truth that, we don't see on our everyday. Or we are seeing it, but we're blind to it because we've been conditioned to think it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So what Carl Sagan was saying about flatland, so I went to engineering school at Cornell. We did a lot of work with dimensions and calculus and integrals and derivatives and whatnot. So I wrote about this in chapter 12 of my book. So what the first dimension is a line. It's a point, a bunch of infinite points that create a line. That's one dimension.
Right.
Two dimensions are, let's say, a square, just a flat square, x and y axis. Three
Okay.
dimensions is a cube. Now you have x, y, and z axis, so it becomes a cube, right?
Right.
So fourth dimension, we can't see. But what Carl Sagan shows you, he shows you the derivative, the shadow of a fourth dimension, which ultimately is a tesseract. That's the name of the shape in a four-dimensional cube. And then it continues on and on and on. But when you take a third dimension, the derivative of a third dimension now becomes second dimension. So a cube becomes a flat square. The derivative of a square, the second dimension, becomes a line, first dimension. So first dimension line, you integrate up, it becomes a square, second dimension. You integrate it up to the third dimension, it becomes a cube. You integrate it up to the
Right.
fourth dimension, it becomes a tesseract, and so on and so on and so on. There's like scientists think there's 26 dimensions out there. The highest
Huh.
dimensionality is God. So ultimately, we can't see it because we live in the 3D. And that's what Carl Sagan is
Oh,
showing. That like he does a demonstration where everyone lives in flatland. They're all in a two-dimensional space. And here comes a third dimensional object and he's trying to talk to you in flatland and they're like, "What the heck? We don't even see it. We don't understand." But when it derives down to a square, it now is on our level. So that's what's happening.
yeah,
That's what's happening. They're dimensional
that totally
beings.
makes sense, actually.
It's
Wow.
energy. It's energy.
Yeah.
And our conscious awakening and expansion is happening now. They can't stop it. This is the collective,
Right.
coming of Christ in some ways. You're connecting to Christ consciousness, the expansion of consciousness. So now we're going
Yeah.
to be able to see hypercolors better. We're going to see multidimensionality a little bit better. We're going to feel things. We're going to know something's here. We're going to hear things now. We're going to talk to our spirit guides. And now we're going to be like, oh, I know who this is. This is an Arcturian, or this is a Pleiadian, or this is, a Syrian. And then we're going to start looking into like the ancient, like megalithic structures that my book talks about. I went to Tiwanaku and Pumapuku after the rainforest in Lake Titicaca in Bolivia. And that's where the Great Flood may have happened. You talk about Genesis, right? The big Great Flood.
Yeah.
And there's these stone structures that are inexplicable, that are cut with laser precision, that were destroyed 12 plus thousand years ago in a flood. What ancient civilizations were there? What caused the pyramids? Well, the plant medicine told me they lift up the rocks. They came in a flash. They left in a flash. They're multidimensional beings. They're Syrians. They come from the stars. There's stargates. And so this is where the real questions start. And do I need the government to tell me what truth is? No, they probably know and they've been hiding. Again, what's real? What's going on? Where am I? So ultimately, it lies with you. What is your truth?
Yeah.
What feels right for you? Call it in, be receptive and open, expand your consciousness, and they may very well come to you.
Yeah. I love that. So I can remember this just I don't know, came to mind as a child. I can remember hearing things and seeing things and kind of just being silenced by it. And I think that's how it works for most of us. I think we're born with that ability,
We
but
are.
the world closes it,
That it does.
literally close minds us.
Mm-hmm.
And
It
so then we
controls the
grow up
narrative.
and we lose it. And
Mhm.
so it wasn't until our daughter had a very deep connection with the spiritual realm and still does. She's 11. Um, and Sophia would see things and say things, and we were just like, and we knew since she was very little that she was very special. All of our children are special. But we did it, she would remember things, she would know things that we were like, "What? How does a child know this?" And my husband was always connected to the spiritual realm, and he would always, see spirits and they would communicate with him, and, still till this day. And so he said, "Everybody tried to silence me and cut me off from it. We will not do that to her." And so we openly would speak to her about it and be open with it. And I have watched her just grow more and more connected. And I'm telling you, at first it scared me. I won't lie, it terrified me. And then as I started experiencing things, I was like, this isn't so scary. This is beautiful.
Yeah.
And we don't know all the answers,
You're never going to
but
know.
if we're willing to listen, we're going to find a lot of truths
That's right. And
that the
by the
world's
government,
not going to tell us.
well, or the government is doing it to spur these conversations now without being fearful and thought of crazy, right? We're literally, I mean, I used to work in the Matrix in New York City and Wall Street like 20 plus years ago. And boom, here I am, a totally different person, transformed and authentic. But had I told my boss, oh, guess what? I
You've
saw
been
an
in a
alien this
mental
weekend.
facility somewhere.
Like, she needs to be fired like tomorrow, So, but now
Right.
I think the more we just make this less of a where it doesn't have to be like like a stigma, right? It doesn't have to be like
No.
some sort of you're being shunned and classified. Again, who's creating this narrative? Who's controlling the narrative? And ask the question why. What's in their
Mm,
interest to keep us
right,
controlled and disempowered and not informed and lack of connection to our own God-given sovereign gifts. So
right,
if I now feel like I am in control of my body and my spirituality and my, way I want to live my life without being told I'm wrong or stupid or need to be, locked away and,
right.
shamed and, whatever else they do, that's where the real courage and the empowerment steps in. No, the answer is no. Goodbye. I'm not listening
I
to you anymore.
often I often think to myself, when the government used to lock people away because they were crazy, did they actually know and they were actually trying to hide something?
Probably.
And
Probably. And or these people were channeling. They were talking to archangels and, have kind of
yeah,
clairaudience and telepathic gifts, And think about it, like the poisons, the environmental kind of poisons in our food and our water and our air, are meant to kind of decalcify our pineal gland and to keep us sick and
right.
dependent,
Yeah,
right?
well, and that's my husband and I were talking about this the other day because I said, I wish we had a farm so we could grow all of our own. And he just kind of chuckled at me and he's like, the problem is you got to make sure you buy your product to plant seeds from the right place because Monsanto is in control of everything
I know.
and
Isn't it sad?
everything has been poisoned. And I was like, and it's true, it really has. So you know, we really have to be very cautious. I try to buy, organic and I live in Amish country, so I love going to our local Amish farms. And, I have the ability to do some of this, but it's so true. There's so much poison in everything. And I believe that that is 90% of your diagnoses that kids have
It's possible.
ADHD. And I'm not saying that these aren't actual diagnoses. They are, but there's something that caused it that's underlying.
It's possible. However, everything's breaking down now. All the
Oh, yeah.
institutions are breaking because the light's coming in. Anything not with the light is breaking down. And so, as a result, us light workers, us wayshowers, us, kind of those waking up and seeing that,
Right?
there's a shift going on, a paradigm shift. As things break down, things get reinvented. And so
Yeah.
we come together in community. We now have these conversations, right? Oh yeah, there's this, there's that. I feel this, I hear that, right?
Right.
I want clean solutions. I really think that our human ingenuity, our inventiveness, our creative power, right, will always win because we're co-creating with God. God wants us in
Right.
abundance, and the planet's going to be healing. So I
Oh,
just want
yeah.
to see again. I put my consciousness on. Well, there's going to be solutions. Right? You see
There is.
everything hitting now. Like we got speed cameras, we got flock cameras, we got all this surveillance shit now coming in. We got AI, like removing our ability to think for ourselves and be, creative thinkers and writing skills now. And so we could say, you know what, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to come together. And we're already seeing people on the internet coming up with creative solutions for these cameras. Like they're spray painting them, they're cutting them down with buzz saws. They're all coming together and saying, no, I'm not doing this. So I have a lot
Right.
of hope. I have a lot of
Yeah.
hope because, us 30 years ago saying I need seeds, I think we would have been in worse shape. But now we're all saying this going, well, what do you know? What can you share? What can you help me with? Because the
Right.
institutions, I think, have such inertia. I've always likened them to like large, large container ships. And I don't know
Yeah.
if you remember, like, I think it was the Suez Canal recently. Well, the Gulf, everyone's talking about the Gulf of Hormuz right now in Iran. It's a very narrow, um,
Yeah.
kind of entryway. But the Suez Canal, in, I believe it was in Egypt, also is the same thing. There was a container ship, a large ship that stupidly tried to like do a K-turn move, like you're parking a car, and got stuck. And that caused so much global supply chain issues. I think this was like about 2 years ago. And so if you could think about it as a large container ship, it just takes forever to turn. It's just so behemoth. It's so slow, such inertia. Those are the institutions: banking,
Yeah.
finance, government, education system, healthcare, right? Pharmaceuticals, all that.
Right.
Media, right? Hollywood. They're behemoths. But the creative little tugboats, the creative little, buzzing round boats that can do, quick moves and, sharp turns and is really
Yep,
quick, right? David and Goliath. That energy is the one that perseveres. That's the one that gets the
absolutely.
stuck container ship, unstuck and flowing free again. And so I
Right.
think all of us coming together are the little like Davids as Goliath is falling right now.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful time to be alive because we're all going to be like supporting one another and helping and growing.
Well, yeah, I believe that. And, I just random thought that came to my head is, I have sat with a lot of people who have struggled with addiction. And as I sit here and I think about it, oftentimes I believe that people struggle with addiction because they're running from what the world is doing, what the world says, that realm. They're running from it. When they do drugs, they go into another realm. They feel the joy, they feel the happiness, they feel the excitement, they feel this euphoria. And I mean, I wish they could feel that without the drug because I think a lot of time it's taking those neural pathways that the world has built for us and deleting those in moments. And they're really chasing what we're actually meant to be. And they don't
Empowered
realize it.
and full of light.
And why
Yeah.
I just thought of that, I don't know. I'm just sitting here, and as you were talking, I was like, "Oh my goodness, some of the conversations I've had, they are actually chasing the divine humanity we already are. We are
Mhm.
all already co-created with God, and they don't even realize that that's what they're chasing, and so that's going to bring me great conversations as I get to talk to them now
Yeah.
because
It's
I
finding your
I
connection to the light.
yeah, and, often I have sat with a lot of people that struggle with addiction, and I understand that sometimes they do really not intelligent things? Absolutely. However, oftentimes they're chasing they're chasing after their creator, and they don't even realize that's what they're chasing. So, I mean, it's definitely gonna open some doors for me as I move forward, and because people that struggle with addiction will always be on my heart. I never personally struggled, but my son lost a friend, as I told you earlier, and it led a lot of addiction, people that struggle with addiction into my life. And then from there, I'll be walking down the street and meet someone that struggles with addiction and pray with them and sit with them because I'm not going to judge them. I refuse. And so I think that oftentimes we don't realize what they're chasing, and they may actually be chasing the same exact thing we're chasing, just in a different form, and they
Connection
don't
back
realize.
to the light. Yeah,
Yeah.
connection back to the light and sense of
Well, and
empowerment.
that's truly where we all need to be is just and that's where we all want to be. Some of us just don't wanna admit it. We don't even realize, I think, in the moment when you're struggling and you're just having those hard moments and you're stuck in that negativity, I don't even think you realize that that's actually what you're chasing is the light.
Yeah,
But
it's
that's
hard.
also why the light puts out the darkness.
Yeah, that's right. The light puts out the darkness. Dark can't expunge the light. Just
No,
doesn't work that
absolutely
way.
not.
Can't.
No. All right, Sarah. Hey, this has been an awesome conversation, and
Cool. Me
it's
too. I liked it,
been
Kayla.
amazing to have you. Um, Anything you would like to say to our listeners, just encouragement before you go?
Yeah, to be emboldened, Embolden Adventures. So yeah, you mentioned this book. You think my book's gonna really impact the lives of whoever, it
I don't
crosses
think I
path.
know.
Okay, I know too, actually. I've gotten some really
I
good
know.
feedback and I know that I channeled it actually, and it's a very, very powerful book. I stand by that
Yes,
statement. I think it's the best first-person account of an ayahuasca experience you're gonna find in a written text, and I stand by that statement. And as a
absolutely.
result, I'm building a retreat in Belize, in the jungles of Belize, 2027. And I mentioned this jungle farm in the book. My friend Allie owns the jungle farm and she's in the book. So what I'm doing is I'm teaching the takeaways of the book at the retreat. And so anyone who's interested, read the book first. There's
Yes.
plenty of really great, you could go on trips. I'll have tours available. You can book your trip to Morocco, the Amazon, and Bolivia as well, with the tour operators that are mentioned in the book. And you could come see me, work with me in person in the retreat in Belize, and we'll talk more about these concepts for 7 days and go to a stone temple. So,
So what I'm
Stone Temple
hearing is the
passport.
first time I ever ride an airplane, I might be sitting next to you.
You can. I'll hold your hand and I'll talk you through it. And I'll point out the engine as we talk offline. Yes. So stonetemplepassport.com, stonetemplepassport.com, sararoccisano.com, emboldenadventures.com. My new website will be launched as the book gets launched in another month or so. So stay tuned.
And in the description, I will share all those sites and we will make sure we definitely share as soon as this book is released. Congratulations. So
Thank
excited
you.
for it. I can't wait.
You're going to
Sarah,
love it.
thank you so much for being with me today. It has been a blessing. God bless each and every one of you. We love you all. Have a blessed evening.
Thank you, Kayla.